If you've been thinking about writing your dream novel for so long but you just don't know where to start, then I've got a few tips for you because I myself started writing my novel last year. I've learned a lot along the way. Hello and welcome to Ume Reads. I'm Ume. V.E. Schwab's Story Corpse method. It's such a perfect metaphor for writing and it works. It helped me complete a 12,000 word skeleton of my entire novel, which I can now pad out. If any of you are familiar with the Save the Cat method, it just goes over my head. I've tried to work with it, but it just doesn't work for me. I do still recommend that you should watch the 45-minute video by V.E. Schwab because she explains each element of the Story Corpse method perfectly well, but I just thought I'd do a quick summary video because I wasn't able to find one when I was looking for one. So let's dive in. Story Corpse method, what is it? It is essentially a method to layer a story into being. The idea is that the story starts as a corpse and then it gradually comes to life as you add more elements. In a nutshell, there's 4 steps to the method. You'll need the bones of your story, which is the plot. You'll need the muscle and tissue of the story, which is the first draft. Then you'll need the flesh, the skin of the story, which is the revision process. And then you'll need makeup, which is the equivalent of line editing. I used it and it works, and I think you should use it too. So let's start with the bones. This part of the Story Corpse method is fundamental and it really helped me narrow down my story. It's essentially the skeleton of the story. For this element, you need to know the beginning of your story and the ending of your story, and then you will essentially plot out all these different scenes, all these bones that form part of your story corpse. The advice that V.E. Schwab gives is that during the collection of these bones, you need to identify 5 to 10 key moments that will form part of your story, and then you will put them in chronological order. That's the first step. Once you've done the first step, you can move on to step 2, which is the muscle and tissue, which is your first draft. So at this point, you have all the bones of your story. They are not padded, they're just simple points. You'll take each of your bones, which are scenes, and you will expand on them, elaborate on them, and then try to tie them in together. This is the bit where you'll expand each bone into scenes, into chapters. You'll know more about the characters at this point, the characters' motivations, their conflicts and twists. This step allows your story to evolve. One of the things that I found the most difficult when trying to write my story was I would write a scene and I wouldn't know where to go next, or I would try so hard to get to the climax of the story without having gone through the significant bones of the story. And what this method allowed me to do was I was able to simplify my entire novel onto an A3 sheet of paper with lots of different scenes, and then know what I needed to pad out each scene. And it really brought my story to life. At this point, you can remove any bones/scenes that you think aren't relevant to the story or don't add much. You won't be able to keep everything. She does advise not to delete everything, but to put it in a separate cut file where you keep all your cutouts. If you loved something and you want to come back to it later, you can always look in that bank of edits to see whether there's anything you can take from there. I think the best bit of this part is that you're able to compile your story in a way where you can put in what you need and take out what you don't need. It's very flexible. It's not a rigid structure, and new information, new scenes, new characters, new aspects of the story can emerge at this stage, and it's such a fun stage of this method. Once you've completed the bones element and your muscles and tissue element, you move on to the third step, which is the flesh and skin step, also known as revision. At this point, you have a draft. You've got your first draft. Congratulations. What you do at this point is you check your character arcs, you look for plot holes, you can tighten your world building, your timelines, and just check that everything connects logically and it works correctly. You should have a very padded out story at this point, and you just have to make sure that it flows. Okay, then we move on to my favorite part of this editing process, which is the makeup part of the story. Yay! You've got the bones, you've got the muscle and tissue, you've got the skin, and now you can add makeup. So this is where you beautify your story. You can amplify everything you've written. You can focus on the words that you use, the sentences, the sentence structure, the paragraph styles. This is where you turn your story into poetry, in my opinion. This is the poetic stage of the editing process. You can spend your time at this stage strengthening the imagery, the voice, the dialogue, the rhythm and the cadence of your writing. This is the bit that I love the most. You might find when you first sit down to write, you want to write things so beautifully, and when you're writing them beautifully, you get so bogged down with beautifying the story, but you don't have a plot or scenes or any sort of structure at this point. So that makes it very difficult. So don't worry about making it too beautiful at the outset. That's for later. The purpose is to get your story down, have a beginning, middle, end. Once you've got there, once you've got that first draft, you are in a much stronger position to edit and bring in all these beautiful changes. V.A. Schwab says herself that she thinks that this is such an important step. Essentially what this step is trying to say is that style comes last, and V.A. Schwab emphasizes the point that some people do try to put makeup on the skeleton before they've even built the body. Starts with the bones, with the tissue, with the muscle, with the skin, then move on to makeup. You can't start off with makeup on a skeleton. To wrap things up, the reason why I love this method, it simplifies the plotting, drafting, editing aspect of writing, and sometimes it's so overcomplicated in writing advice that you receive that you go down a rabbit hole of trying to figure out how to write, what to do, all of that. This method works really well in allowing all these aspects to be brought into separate stages, so you're not doing it all at once, so you're not overstepping on different aspects of your writing process. One of the things that I learned very early on when I started to write is that there's a difference between the type of writing advice you're getting. When you're an amateur writer, you will just search for writing advice, but there's writing routines, there's how to structure a plot, how to write descriptions, there's lots of elements of the writing process. When you're coming in as a beginner, you don't necessarily have that structure, and I think that the Story Corpse method does a fantastic job of allowing you as a beginner writer to have a structure to follow. That is the method that I use to write. If you found it helpful, let me know in the comments. If you use something else, let me know. If you use Save the Cat, let me know what you love about it, because I've tried to use it and it just didn't work for me. One of the things that I've really struggled with as part of my writing is having a writing routine. I go through phases where I hyperfixate on my story and I write endlessly day and night, and then I will leave it for 3 months and I've not even looked at it. So one of the key things that I need to focus on now is building a writing routine that works for me. I have seen the Stephen King writing routine where he writes a book in 3 months, and I find that really interesting because I am a serial procrastinator, and I know that if I start to write, I get distracted by other projects and I just need a structure. And 3 months is a solid amount of time for me to start and finish something. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. If you want me to vlog that experience, let me know. And if you want me to do a video talking more about that, also let me know in the comments. Once again, thank you so much for watching. Bye!